but his small business owner is currently serving as the 62nd governor of Kentucky. In his first term as governor, he has shown an unwavering commitment to fiscal responsibility, working tirelessly to strengthen and stabilize Kentucky's financial foundation. He is committed to investing in education, workforce development, reforming foster care and adoption, creating a healthier Kentucky, and protecting those who protect us, and creating open and transparent government. Let me say the one more thing. As I told you earlier, this is the governor of the state that has one Planned Parenthood clinic left. Phenomenal. And it's his leadership that has really led to a lot of this and the tireless work of so many people. And we just want to welcome Governor Matt Bevin.
Thank you very much. I tell you, it's a dangerous idea during a wonderful dinner to ask somebody who's in the political world to speak to you. That's nothing that might mess with your digestion like that. But thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. It is an honor to be here, and while it was made to sound as if my arm had to be twisted, it's really just a function of timing and schedule. You all know this. You all know the demands from your congregations and others in the organizations that you're a part of. It's really not a function of not wanting to do certain things. I have thought the world of Star Parker for so long, from long before I ever met her. I knew of her, I had occasion to listen to her and watch her on TV and in various interviews, and I just thought, who is this woman? Who is this bold, courageous, tells it like it is kind of a woman? And to have come in the years since then to know her personally, it is truly an honor for me to be here. It is, and thank you so much for this invitation. I will, in the course of my conversations, I'll make a few comments. I'll share with you a couple of thoughts, ask you a couple of questions. But then when we're done, I've just said I'm happy to take whatever questions you have. I'm willing to stay here as you all allow and your schedule does to answer any questions you have. So as we're going through, if there's things you've heard that you wish you wanted more information on, or things you haven't heard and wanted to talk about, I'll be happy to do that as well. But I want to remind us, and I think you know this, I'm preaching literally to the choir in some respects. Some of you literally, some of you figuratively. But I'll tell you how blessed we are to live in the United States of America. How blessed we are to be able to gather freely. That we are afforded the luxury of being able to assemble freely as we have here tonight. To worship freely. To open sessions and to have our meals blessed, to call out to the name of Jesus Christ. And we don't worry about who is going to follow us home. We don't worry about what opposition to this is going to come and stand at our door to threaten us or our families. How blessed we are to freely assemble, the freedom of speech, the ability to preach the word to people, not only from the pulpit, which is what many of you do, but in our daily lives, and that's our responsibility. Don't kid ourselves. To be the hands and feet of Christ doesn't happen just on Sunday mornings, doesn't happen just on Wednesday nights. It really doesn't. I mean, it's our responsibility to be the hands and feet of Christ, even to those who may not share that belief, may not care for that belief, may not understand it, but we are, and we were just talking about this a moment ago, at our table as we were speaking before this. The truth is the truth. It doesn't matter if you believe it. It doesn't matter if you recognize it. It doesn't matter if you choose to reject it. The truth is still the truth. And we were created in the image of God. We were created to absolutely have a relationship with our Creator. And whether we believe that or not, it is the fact. And so if we are out there embodying that, then we will move people and we will touch people and we will change minds in powerful, powerful ways. And that is our responsibility. There have been many things that have been written on a political front, one of which was written on a cold winter night in December of 1776. There was a guy by the name of Thomas Paine. We were just speaking a moment ago. I always love it when someone quotes me a Federalist paper. I think it was Federalist 78 you were quoting me a moment ago. a pastor from Texas, was sharing that with me. And I will say this. These were the people who thought about things, one of which I'm going to share you. And you've all heard this statement. This is a man, Thomas Paine, who said, "These are the times that try men's souls." My gracious, could that be more apropos for today? I mean, these indeed are the times that still try men's souls. But what he said that a lot of people don't remember what comes after that, but he said it is at times like this, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said it's at times like this, it's the summer soldiers and the sunshine patriots who will fade away. And this is not only a political issue. This was not only a military issue. This is a spiritual issue. This is a spiritual issue, and I will challenge you. I'm not a man of the cloth. I don't preach in a pulpit, but I'm going to call to you and ask of you that you take your responsibilities to a whole nother level, even perhaps than what you are, because these are indeed the times that try men's souls. And indeed, even in the pulpits, and Lord knows in governor's seats and in any number of other elected offices, including in this town, there are people who are summer soldiers and sunshine patriots, and they are shirking their responsibility, and they are fading away, and they're avoiding the fight at a time when we need to step up like we have never stepped up before. This is that time. These are those times. And I would tell you, I mean, you've heard it said, you've preached messages on this, I am sure. But it has been said, without vision, the people will perish. How true it is. It's true for every one of your congregations. It's true for your denominations. It's true for your communities. It's true for your families. It's true for whatever organization you're a part of. It's true for a state. It's true for a business. It's true for a nation. That if indeed we do not have a vision, if we don't know why we are here or where we're going or what our purpose is, that indeed we will perish. We may not even know we are perishing. And indeed, it is the apathy and the blindness and the complacency that we have the luxury of having now because we are so blessed that is the very bane of our own existence, and we're asleep at the wheel in many respects. We are. And so I would encourage you to ask yourself, what is your vision? At whatever level, small or large, what is your vision? What is the vision for cure? What is it that drew you here? Why are you here? Some of you are here because you've been here since day one. Some of you believe with a passion in the mission of cure and understand it jot and tittle. Others of you are here out of curiosity. Others of you were invited by someone, and some of you may even now still be saying, I'm not sure why I'm here. But I will tell you, I hope over the course of these days you get a sense of the urgency that is calling to us in America on so many fronts. And we as a nation are losing our way. I don't say this as an alarmist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But the farther we get away from our founding documents, from our founding principles, from the Judeo-Christian principles upon which this nation was built, the more rudderless we become, the more lost we become, the more confused we become, the more convoluted we become. And we are telling young people in particular that up is down and in is out and right is wrong, and we're confusing people with a bunch of nonsense that we know to be untrue. And as we said a moment ago, whether we believe it or not, the truth is still the truth. The truth is the truth. So why are you here? I'm guessing you are here because you look around your communities. You look across the pews as you're preaching. You see in your congregations. You see maybe even within your own families. But you see certainly in the United States of America that we are crumbling at the edges, that the underbelly is becoming soft in many ways. And so I'm guessing you came here tonight because you want some better version of the America that you grew up in for your own children and your own grandchildren. I'm guessing this is why you're here. And if indeed you want it, my question to you is, how badly do you want it? How badly do you want it? Because I will tell you quite literally, if you don't want it, more badly than just to come and stay in a 5-star hotel and eat a fantastic meal and rub elbows with people who are largely of like mind, who are good, intelligent, and thought-provoking people, but then go home and not do anything different. If you don't want it as badly as the men and women who came over here on rickety boats, And I will tell you this, the people in this room are descended from folks who came over here under very different circumstances on boats. That's the reality of it. But the truth be told, those who came here risked much, whether they did it volitionally or otherwise. Tremendous risk was taken by the people who came here. And they risked everything for the very freedoms that we now have. It's so good we can afford to not even care about. We have the luxury of not even caring about the things that others sacrificed to give to us. There have been 1.5 million people since the inception of this nation who have died in uniform. 1.5 million Americans have died in uniform since the inception of America. So all these freedoms and all these liberties and all these things that so many of us in the 21st century can afford to take for granted, someone paid dearly for that. A number of you, I'm sure, as well did. I served in active duty in the military. I served alongside guys who are dead, whose children have grown up without a father. Men my age, whose kids are now young adults themselves, who didn't have the luxury of a dad at the ball field, a dad at graduation, a dad when they walked down the aisle. Tremendous, tremendous price has been paid for our freedom. So how badly do you want the better future for your church, for your community, for your family, for your state, for this country? Do you want it as badly as the men who, in the winter of 1776, if they were lucky enough, as this nation was trying to separate itself from an overbearing king, if they were lucky enough to even have shoes, they ate those shoes to keep from starving to death. Do you want it that badly? Do you? Seriously, do you want it as badly as the men who stepped off transport carriers on Omaha Beach, who knew they were going to die, who saw their friends fall in front of them, some before they even got on solid footing, who stepped over thousands of bodies, lifeless and dying in some instances, and tried to make it 10 yards farther up the beach? Do you want it that badly? Do you want it as badly as a man who sat in a Birmingham jail, not knowing what his fate would be, and penned one of the most powerful, poignant, thought-provoking, soul-wrenching letters written ever? Do you want it that badly? How badly do you want to see a change in the communities and churches and families and states and country that you're a part of? How badly do you want it? Because I'll tell you, if there is not within you a desire to reach for it like you have never reached, if you don't want it as badly as those who we've just mentioned, as badly, I'm looking over here at Frederick Douglass. This is a man who, you know his story, I don't need to tell it to you, but this is a man who walked in and spoke it straight to the President of the United States. A man who, when in that era in particular, there's never been a time when people would feel overly comfortable doing that, but there certainly wasn't the case when an African American at that time would have walked in and had the kind of frank conversations that he had with the President of the United States. But he convicted that president and many thousands of others. Do you want it as badly as that? What risk are you willing to take? Seriously, it doesn't matter your race. Let's be honest. I'm not trying to be dismissive of that. If it was mentioned in my family, I have 9 children. I have boy kids, girl kids, black kids, white kids, older kids, younger kids. I've got a little microcosm of America in my house. And I will say this, I love every one of them, and I discipline every one of them, and I expect the same things of every one of them. These things we're talking about, these transcendent truths, don't care what color we are. They don't care what party we are. They don't care what denomination we are. They don't. They don't care. These things transcend that. So if you don't want it badly enough, as badly as these, then I would say, these folks we've talked about and so many more that we could talk about, if you don't want it that badly, then I would submit to you we don't deserve it. And we wonder why things don't change in our communities, and we wonder why things don't change in our families, and we wonder why things don't change in our country. What are we really doing in a different way, in a more powerful way? What power are we willing to speak not only to people in power, but people in the pews of our church? And this wasn't even something I was going to talk about, but a real heart that I have. And I'm going to speak to you all and beg of you that you challenge the men in your communities to step up and be men. Because I'm telling you, I'm serious. It's not easy. But there are so many children. I have a heart and a passion for foster care and adoption. And 4 of our children are adopted, as you might have guessed from my earlier description of them. The point is this. There are 400 and some thousand children right now in foster care in the United States, about 437,000. Many tens of thousands of those children right now are eligible to be adopted, want to be adopted, are fully ready and willing to be adopted, want a forever family, want the home and the love of a mother and a father, somebody to pour into them. And we in the faith community, we're dropping the ball big time because we've abdicated on a lot of fronts responsibility to the government. We say, well, there's a program for that, there's a department for that, there's some funding for that. Come on. This is the responsibility of the church. This is the responsibility of the church. And by the church, I don't care, again, the denomination, I don't care the ideology. The point is this, if you consider yourself to be a follower of Christ, which is what the definition of a Christian is, I truly imagine that God's heart breaks when he sees us fighting about whether there's music or not music, or whether we recite something or don't recite something, or whether it's debts or trespasses or whatever divides us. It must break the heart of God that we fight over things that are rules we make up and we lose sight of the actual issue. And it is the responsibility of the church and of people in this room and others we represent to be the hands and feet to the widows and the orphan and the people in prison. We are forgetting entire sections of our society. We are. This is another passion of mine, is criminal justice reform. We have 2 million people in our prison system, in state and federal prisons, and 97% of them are going to be released. What are we doing to truly re-assimilate people? We're good at removing people. There's 3 re's, and we're good at the first one. We're good at removing. But what are we doing about rehabilitating people? What are we doing about re-assimilating people? What are we doing? This, again, this should not be a political issue. The irony is I happen to be in one party that's not normally the party associated with this. Who cares? Another thing I've done from the time I've been elected, I've been pardoning people from the very beginning. This idea that you wait to the end because you want to be safe and you don't want to have a political ramification, it's that kind of nonsense. It's that kind of weakness, truthfully, that I would challenge you on many fronts to be more bold than that. Be more bold than that in whatever your role is. I'm blessed with that, it being one responsibility I have and one privilege that I have. But what are we doing? Again, these things are biblical. These are transcending any party. They're transcending this immediate conversation or any thoughts I have or any one of us has. These are eternal truths. And these are, how is it that you will know? Christ was asked. By the way in which you love one another. People will know you by your fruits. What are our fruits? Many of us, our fruit has gotten stale. It's rotting on the tree. It's falling to the ground, and people aren't even bothering to pick it up. And I'm telling you, really and truly, we are better than this. I mean, we have, in Kentucky alone, we have 9,500 children in the foster care system. I got about 2,400 that are eligible for adoption. I have 6,000 some churches. If I can't find out of every 2.5 churches, one home for a child who wants a home, shame on us. And I'll tell you, I think that Kentucky is just one slice of 50. Your states are probably some variation, larger or smaller, of the very same thing. This is our responsibility. Think about this. Think about this. You're familiar. Again, I feel silly as a non-preacher talking to a room full of preachers, but I will say this. You think about Ezekiel. You think about the watchman on the wall. You're familiar with it. But it isn't just a function of the warning to be the watchman on the wall. We're not just told to watch. What are we told? We're warned that if we see what's coming, and we do, because these are the times that try men's souls, we see what's coming. We see it all around us. We see it in our homes, in our churches, in our communities, in our state, and in our country. I've said that half a dozen times on purpose because it doesn't matter. You can't look this way and pretend, well, I don't notice it because it's not in this direction. It's in every direction. We see it because we're on the wall. We've been blessed because we've been raised by someone who put us on a path and or crossed paths with someone who put us on a path. And we've been saved by grace, and we are in a position where now, whether we like it or not, we're on the wall and we can see what's coming. But if we see what's coming and we don't sound the alarm, it's on us, period, straight up. That's it. It's on us. We don't get a pass. We don't get to pretend that wasn't the case. I look at my family. I mean, maybe this is a time to tell you this. Maybe it's not. I'll just share it with you. My parents didn't grow up in a faith-based community at all. They didn't go to church. Their families did not go to church. I'm the second of 6 children. I was born in the 60s. The 60s were a kind of squirrely time, as many of you in this room remember. It really was. A lot of things happened in the 60s, good, bad, and otherwise. But in the 1960s in Colorado, in a health food store, when I was the second of what were then 3 young children, my mother had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, me, and a brand new baby. And she was in a health food store in Colorado in the 1960s, and some woman saw her and decided she needed to hear about the love of Jesus Christ. And you think about that. You think about the trajectory of what that has meant to my family. The fact that my mother, because she knew, whether she believed it, knew it or not, or had ever heard it, because she was created in the image of God, that she knew the truth when she heard it. And it was convicting. And then for my father, and then they changed their decision-making process, and they chose to raise their children in a way that I was able to take for granted, that many of us perhaps had a similar story. But it doesn't stay this way by accident. We have to be intentional, to be bold. How badly do you want it? What are you going to do when you see what's happening? Will you sound the alarm? These are our responsibilities. They are. This isn't meant to be a political speech, and if it turns into more of a rant, forgive me, but I'm telling you, we have tremendous responsibility. But it isn't just a function of knowing it, of being convicted to do it. The way in which we go about serving as the hands and feet of Christ makes a powerful difference. Powerful difference. You think about when Paul wrote to Timothy. 2 Timothy 1:7, again, you probably preached on this. You probably could recite it. But we were told not to have a spirit of what? Timidity, of fear. Why? Because we know the truth. Because we've been bought at a great price. Because we know the value of who we are. We know our role and our purpose. And so Paul, an older man, writing to a younger man and providing him some tremendous advice, said, you don't need to have a spirit of fear and timidity. But of what? 3 things. 3 things. Power. Power is the first. To be powerful, to be bold, to not be apologetic, but to be unapologetic, and to be able to articulate why you believe what you believe, and not let modern society and all the enlightened people tell us to keep our mouths shut as if somehow our antiquated notions aren't worthy of being discussed in public. Nonsense. Nonsense. We are to have a spirit of power, but it's more than just that. It needs to be delivered also with love. And this is something where, and I'm telling you, again, we in the faith community don't do this as well as we could. We don't. We're way too judgmental. Christ associated with and was ridiculed by all the religious leaders of the day because he hung out with all the wrong people. He's talking to the woman at the well. Everyone knew that woman. Don't talk to that woman. Don't be associated with that woman. Heaven forbid, don't interact with and try to change the trajectory of the life of that woman who'd made 4, 5, 6, 7 bad decisions on many fronts. We don't even know the half of it. He knew. The taxpayers, the people that others would say don't associate, the lepers, the cripples, the people that were the outcasts. We have in this society people in our communities, including those in which you serve, people who have been perhaps in the criminal justice system, who have become third-class citizens in our nation, the greatest nation that has ever existed. And we have created entire subclasses and subcultures of people who, well, we just don't, it's not polite company, we're not going to, You think about this. When the master threw the feast, who ultimately came? Not the people who took it for granted, not the people who didn't even care because they had it so good they could have a feast next week or they had their own feast coming up. It was ultimately the people in the highways and the byways. It was the people in the alleys. It was the forgotten people. who came in. That's our responsibility. You know who they are, and if you don't, you should. All of us should. We should find these people. Our job is to be the hands and feet to those people. These things are our responsibility. Every one of us. We've all been blessed with different circumstances. I grew up in a very humble way, so I'm guessing did many of you. I was born in Colorado, but I grew up in northern New Hampshire, right near the Canadian border. In a little town of 250 people in the woods. We had no central heat. We never had a shower. I shared a bedroom with my 3 brothers in an unheated house, and it was brutal. But you know what? So too did a whole lot of people. It was life. I share this with you only to say that from circumstances that nobody would have ever thought that I'd be in a position. Yesterday morning, I got a call from the President of the United States who called me at my house, and we talked for 10 minutes. I mean, who would have thunk that? I don't share that as anything other than just a straight-up fact. If anybody had ever told you that a little kid like me, my dad worked at a bunch of different jobs. Worked at a shoe factory, it burned down. His next job was at a McDonald's. He worked most of my life at a dowel mill making products out of wood. Raising a family of 6, we raised crops and animals. My life as a kid, my social highlight of my life was going to the county fair with my animals and sleeping in the barn for a week and sneaking out onto the midway after dark, literally. And that was the height of I never flew in an airplane. I was 17 years old. I won a trip through 4-H the first time I went anywhere. Simple kid, country kid, similar to many of you in this room. But I tell you this, as was noted even from the comments a moment ago, the American dream is a real thing. It affords incredible opportunity, but our job is not to keep it to ourselves. It's to share it. Some of you are probably familiar with this story that I'll share with you. It's not a story, it's a fact. Other side of the world, in the Middle East, there's 2 bodies of water. You know which they are. They're 65 miles apart. They're both fed by the exact same river. The exact same river. The Jordan River, you know this river. You know all the things that have happened from the life-giving Jordan River. All the miracles, all the stories, all the things that have transformed our lives and that of the world. And that one river feeds through 2 bodies of water that are not dissimilar in size. But one of them has an abundance of life in it. It has fish in it, and people still to this day fish on it as they have for years. And there's an abundance of agricultural land around it. It's irrigated by the water from this body. 65 miles away is another similar body of water fed by the exact same river that is dead. It's dormant. The first sea is the Sea of Galilee. The second is the Dead Sea. What's the difference? The first one takes water in and it gives it back. The second one takes it in, it doesn't give it back. I beg of you to please don't listen to this and those that will follow me and those that preceded me. To hear these stories, to be moved by them in any way, shape, or form, or even not, but to take it in, eat a meal, enjoy your time in D.C., and go home and not give it back. It's our responsibility to take this all in. All that we hear here, all that we're blessed with in this country, all that we've been blessed with by the sacrifices of others, known to us and not known to us, and to give it back, to be the hands and feet of Christ, to be the watchman on the wall. This is our responsibility. It is the purpose. Will you receive flack? Of course you will. Will people hate you and despise you? Of course you will. We were told by our Savior this would be the case. You will be despised and ridiculed and mocked because of me. He didn't come, he came in love, but he said straight up, I'm here to divide families. It's not because it was his intent, because he knew that the truth is painful. The truth is insufferable to some. We were just looking at a passage in Exodus about how error and truth don't really get along well. And truth is the enemy of error. These are things we have to keep in mind as we go out and think, what is our purpose? What is our responsibility? It's a tremendous responsibility. But the American dream has afforded us the chance to go transform lives and to keep it in an eternal perspective. Because this is the blink of an eye. It's a long blink, but it is the blink of an eye. It's the only thing we know. My wife and I lost our oldest daughter when she was 17 years old in an automobile accident. And some of you have perhaps experienced this. You've been pastors of church where members of your congregations have experienced this. And what you've come to realize is, truth be told, there's nothing you can tell somebody at a time like that. There really isn't. It's your presence and being there and your willingness to be a shoulder at any time for those folks that makes the difference. But it shapes you, it changes you. It causes you to realize what's important and what isn't. It puts it all into stark contrast, quick. What's worth it, what's not, what's worth fighting for, what priorities you should have. There is no perfect person, not myself, not any one of us in this room. Our founding father, Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't a founder, but he was a man very important to this nation and the things he did. You go back farther still to guys like George Washington, the first president of this country. After the American Revolution, he was asked to be the president. First, they wanted to make him the king. They wanted to make him an emperor. He didn't want that. He said, for crying out loud, we just got rid of one. They said, well, we want you to be the president. And what he said to them is something that perhaps you're familiar with. What did he say? When they first asked him, are you willing to be the president? We have decided unanimously down here in this hot, sweaty summer in 1789 in Philadelphia, we've just come forward and we've decided we want you to be our leader. We want you to be our president. And he said, have I not done enough for my country? Have I not done enough for my country? I don't know every one of you in this room. I know myself and I know some of you in this room. And I'm willing to say there's not a person in this room, there's not a person in this town, there's not a person in this country that could say with a straight face, have I not done enough for my country? There's not one of you that could say with a straight face, have I not done enough for my congregation? Have I not done enough for my community? Have I not done enough for fill in the blank? Because the truth is, we could all still do more. It is our responsibility. We should have a sense of urgency. We should have a sense of conviction and a sense of boldness. And again, the key, and I speak to those of you that are the younger ones in this room, but frankly to everyone, the key is to be able to be an apologist for what we believe. Don't just say it, don't just repeat it, but know it with conviction that you can actually defend it and articulate it. Share it with people, because truth is truth, and it moves people, and it changes lives, sometimes in a health food store in Colorado in the 1960s, sometimes in the front pew, sometimes in a back alley, sometimes on a sidewalk in front of an abortion clinic, sometimes in a governor's office. You don't know where it could be in this moment, in this place. Who knows when? I'll close with this and I'll take questions if you would like. I pray for my children for two very specific things. And I pray this for them out loud. I pray it for them when I'm with them and when I'm not with them. I pray that they will have wisdom and discernment, that they will know the difference between right and wrong. Because as we mentioned earlier, and it's true, we live in a mixed up world. We live in a world that does indeed try men's souls. And the messages we're being sent are convoluted. And we are telling young people that right is wrong. And my prayer for my children who are between the ages of 19 and 8. I have 6 teenage daughters right now. People wonder why I'm out of town. I have 6 teenage daughters right now. I'm just kidding. They're awesome. I love them. They truly, I'm very blessed. I've got an amazing wife who makes it all possible. But I pray that they'll know the difference between right and wrong. And it's my prayer for each of you as well. But truth be told, that's the easier part. I pray for them for a second thing. And that is that they will have the courage to do the right thing. Because frankly, that's the harder part. That's the harder part. It's easy sometimes to know what's right. It's hard to do that right thing. Will you be attacked? Yes, you will. Will you be scorned and ridiculed and mocked? Yes, you will. Aristotle once said that if you want no criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. We're better than that. We've been bought at a great price. We're better than this. So I pray for you the same thing. I pray that you will know the difference between what's right and wrong. I pray that you will have the courage to do that right thing. And I want to leave you with some words that are going to sound very familiar to many of you. I noticed on this, and forgive me, I probably should have noticed it earlier. When I flipped open this, I saw that the topic of my conversation with you was to be marching forward. I don't know if I've hit that or not, but I want to leave you with these words. I've perhaps given you some, I don't know if they're marching orders, marching requests, perhaps. But I want to leave you with these words, which is a final verse in a stanza that many of you will know. Then let our songs abound, and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's grounds to fairer worlds on high. We're marching on to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy. I'll hear your question and I'll repeat it. So if it's from this corner, I'll repeat whatever the question is. If it's from this corner, so that everybody will hear it before I answer. Any questions or thoughts, comments that I can address or share? Some thoughts? Yes, sir. What's that? Well, I moved to Illinois. I'm pretty well locked in right now in Kentucky. Hey, I will say this. Daniel Boone, the man who first came through the Cumberland Gap, and was really the pioneer who opened up what was then the wilderness of Kentucky and an extension of Virginia at that time. He said when he came through that Cumberland Gap and looked around, he said, surely heaven must be a Kentucky kind of place. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of truth to that. There really is. Then and now, there's a lot of truth. Yes, sir.
What is the cause? How do you assess that, and what do you prescribe?
Wow. Yeah, thanks for the easy softball right there out of the gate. Here's what I would say. I mean, time doesn't even begin to allow us to fully address this, but I will tell you what the cause is. We're in an increasingly godless society. That's the cause. That's it. I'm not saying that to patronize you. I'm not saying it because you are people of God, but the more we have removed this idea of an absolute truth, an absolute right from our society, the more we've told young people that everything is relative, and the more we've told them that if it feels right, just do it, and who is someone else to judge you, and who is someone else to lay rules down on you. The more we've been removed from this, the more intentionally enlightened we've been, the more we've seen the cost that it has created for us. And when we've become godless, and again, not everybody even shares the same beliefs that many of us do. Not everyone in this room shares the same beliefs. But I will tell you, there is absolute right and there's absolute wrong. And the creator of the universe, who endowed us with certain inalienable rights to include life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, these things cannot be taken away by government. And as government has tried increasingly to box these things out, push these things out, pretend they don't matter, pretend we were not founded on Judeo-Christian principles, pretend all these things etched into the walls and into the mantles and into the columns of every building in this town aren't really there. Come on. This idea that our founders didn't believe in God. Have you walked through the Capitol? Have you looked around at the things that were chosen by the people that preceded us to be the things that were there to inspire us? But I will say this, and again, I mean, this wasn't specifically what you asked, but the responsibility starts in our homes. It does. We have become amoral more than we have become immoral. And what I mean by that, and perhaps you know, but I mean to be amoral is to think that it doesn't matter, that there is no morality, that there really is no right and wrong, and so it's all okay, whatever. You can't blame a young person for being immoral if they've been never raised to understand what morality is. And whose responsibility is that? It is that of the older people. That's it. I like to think of myself as being a younger person, but it's clear, and you can tell by looking at me, I'm not. And those days are done. But the truth be told, every one of us was blessed to have been raised by somebody who got us here in varying degrees of imperfection. That's an important thing to understand too. There is no perfect parent. There is no perfect home. There is no perfect methodology whereby a child is raised up. But that doesn't mean we don't do it to the best of our ability. And I'm telling you, we've got to get to, I touched on it earlier, and I don't want to beat it to death. And I know you're going to have a session, I think it's even after that, when we talk about the sanctity of human life. I mean, if ever, and for me, a white guy to talk to preachers in the black church, but I'm going to just say, if we can't defend the sanctity of human life, shame on us. Shame on us. Because within the black community, this has become an absolute abomination. It has become a scourge on the black community. It has become, and again, people throw around words, and they can be overinflated and they can be non-applicable, but I'm telling you, it is genocidal. We are losing generations of people. And why? Because it's convenient, because it's easier, because it just removes the need to take the responsibility. It is an abdication of responsibility, and it's done under the guise of freeing people, and it's done under the guise of enlightenment and giving people their freedom and choice. What a canard that is. What a load of baloney. The irony is, for women, under the guise of giving them freedom and choice, we've given them 100%. Who's gotten the freedom and choice? The men have, that's who. They could say, well, hey, I was willing to write a check for a couple $100. I was willing to pay. I've washed my hands of it. Women have been saddled with all the responsibility, and we, all of us in this society, have allowed it to happen. It's crazy to me that 2 out of 3 black children born in this country are born out of wedlock, that are born into a home without a mother and father. Here's another thing that's sobering. This isn't just in the black community. It's increasingly across America, in every culture, every community, every race. Earlier this year, in the spring of 2018, for the first time in the history of America, and it's not likely to ever go back, certainly not in the foreseeable future, for the first time in America, there are more children growing up in a home without their biological mother and father than children who are. It's been prevalent in many of your communities for a long time, so maybe that doesn't seem shocking. But in America, including in the middle of the Corn Belt, in the Bible Belt, and every other belt where you'd think it would be the exact opposite, on average in America, more children now live in a home without their biological mother and father than children who do. So what has gone wrong? Where have we lost our way? This is it. We're not taking responsibility for our own families, for the ways in which we instruct them, for the challenges we demand of people from the pulpit, from the teachers and coaches and parents. We all, if you touch the life of a child, you have a great responsibility, a great responsibility. And I would encourage you, please, to seize it and pour in like never before. You change one life, you might change the trajectory. Again, I can't even imagine if someone hadn't talked to my mother, what my life might have been. What my life might have been. Certainly would have been a whole lot worse than it is. I'd be lost and rudderless probably, unless someone else crossed my paths somewhere. Other questions? Yes, sir, and then over here.
Actually, I had 2 questions. You don't have to answer both. You can choose which one you want to answer. The fact that Kentucky only has 1 Planned Parenthood facility, is that a result of a policy that you have done, or is that a result of something else? Or the other question is, when it comes to Christian couples adopting the children, foster children, how do we overcome the anti-Christian scrutiny that we would have to go through? For example, being questioned in terms of how we would discipline the parent, the child, whether or not we would embrace their gender confusion. How do we overcome those obstacles?
Those are 2 great questions. The first was about did you all hear the question? No, okay. The first question was, and I'm going to answer them both. He gave me the choice of answering either one. I'm going to answer them both. The first question was, in Kentucky, the mention was made that there's only 1 Planned Parenthood facility, and was that the result of policies of this administration, and how did that come to be the case? The second of which was, for people in the faith-based community, the Christian community specifically, as the pushback comes increasingly strong for those looking to adopt, and the intrusion and the questioning and the pushback, what is it that I might suggest that we would do in that environment, and what might we do? Is that a fair assumption? Okay. The first thing is, truth be told, we don't have any Planned Parenthood facilities in Kentucky performing abortion. There's one. There was. We undid that. So, but I will say this, because they were doing it illegally. They were doing it. Here's the wonderful thing. Liberals love the law. When it works for them, oh, they hate the law when it works against them. Oh, they hate that. They run to their friends in the courts and they get the law to change, which literally just happened. If it were not for the fact that a judge last week in Kentucky took a law that exists in almost every state and has existed in Kentucky for decades, and unilaterally by himself, one judge says, you know what, that law is unconstitutional, I don't like it. If it were not for that, if he did his job, which was to uphold the law, which is that law that requires an abortion facility to have a transfer agreement. You've just watched this Gosnell movie, some of you, for crying out loud, things go wrong. And if you don't even have a transfer agreement, you should not have the ability to perform an abortion. And if in fact that had been upheld, there wouldn't be a single facility left in Kentucky today. That is this judge changed this law by himself simply because he didn't want to be the judge that shut down, in his estimation, the last abortion facility. When I was elected 2.5 years ago, there were 3 abortion facilities performing abortions in Kentucky. There's one left, and it's operating illegally, except that a judge has now said that that's okay. So I'm going to appeal this to the 6th Circuit, and we will win. I'm confident, because the law is the law. So that's one thing. And here's the thing. I encourage you, please. You asked a question earlier, and then I'll answer your second question about adoption. You asked about what is the root cause of this in our society. If we can't defend human life, how can we be surprised at everything else that's falling apart around us? If we won't fight with passion, why is it that the sidewalks outside the abortion facilities in every one of your communities are not lined every single day that people are there? And truth be told, why in the fact, for many of us in this room, there are some Catholics in this room, but I'm betting there are more Protestants in this room. And frankly, why is it that it's the Catholic community that more than the Protestant community has taken ownership of this? Shame on us, really and truly. This is our responsibility. It is a human responsibility. It is a Christian responsibility. It transcends even our faith, truth be told, but it's certainly a part of our faith at its very core fundamental principle. The second question was about pushback that people get about adoption. My predecessor, I'm only the 4th, I happen to be a Republican, which incidentally, and you all probably know this, so too was the man who wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail. He was a registered Republican his entire life and only a Republican. A lot of people don't understand that. It's not taught. We quickly disregard and reinvent history. And I'll tell you, to our own detriment. But I will say this. I'm the 4th Republican in about 100 years. It's not the Republican Party that makes me what I am. It's an ideology, it's a set of principles, and it's things that you fight for. But I will tell you, those principles, these things we're talking about here, these truths are invariably being found only on one side of the political aisle in today's day and age. The other side is getting so squirrely and crazy that they literally debate and boo and ultimately remove any mention of God from their basic tenets and platform of their party. And those who say maybe we should put it in there because it always has been, get booed. Come on. What is that nonsense? I mean, I don't care if your Nana and Papa are going to roll over in their grave. It's time, it's all right. I mean, this is really and truly. I hear that all the time in Kentucky. Well, my mama would roll over in her grave. Well, I don't think so. But here's what I'll say. My predecessor gave on his way out the door, literally as I had been elected and he was leaving, but before I was sworn in, gave the right to the ACLU and an organization, I forget exactly which one, but one of these ones for separation of church and state it sounds great, but basically they want to remove any religion from society. One of those groups in the ACLU, he gave them the responsibility to be able to vet every foster placement in Kentucky and to be able to inquisitively ask what degree of religious training they would be providing and to make decisions as to whether or not that was too much or whether they would be too judgmental and basically be the arbiter of what foster homes these kids went to. The governor, who had no authority or right to even do this, abdicated and gave that responsibility to the ACLU and this outside group. That's another thing I got rid of. But I will say this, and again, but why? It doesn't make me such a tough guy, whatever. It's wrong. He had no right to even do this. But it sure isn't the role or responsibility. Let me just say another thing, and you know this, but it is not the responsibility of the government to raise children in America. It's not. It's not. It is the responsibility of the families and of the churches and of the communities to raise these children. It is our responsibility. So with respect to the pushback, push back on the pushback. That's what I would say. Push back on the pushback. Stand firm. Stand bold. Stand with conviction. I mean, literally. This really and truly, our response, we don't have a spirit of timidity. We were not redeemed to have a spirit of fear. We are standing on solid ground. We should stand firm, lean in, oppose the opposition. It folds quickly, like a cheap suit. I'm really and truly, people on the other side often resort to what? First thing, it's emotion. It's all emotionally driven. What comes after the emotion? Anger. An attack. What comes after that? They don't want to talk about it because you're just unenlightened. Who are you? That's nonsense. It takes so little. If you are an apologist, not an apologizer for, but an apologist, is somebody who can articulate what you believe, who has a passion for it, and can explain it, you win in an argument in about 2 volleys. You really do, by speaking the truth. And if a person comes into your home and says that you don't have the right to lay down a spiritual environment in which your kid is to be raised, push back on that. Stand firm as a community. Find members of your congregation or others in the community that are in the legal community that will come alongside. There are organizations nationally. There's organizations like CURE that will come alongside you and help to defend you against this kind of nonsense. And there are people that are known who have a heart for this. So tap into them. Yes, sir.
Governor.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You mentioned re-assimilation for those coming from criminal justice. What policies have you seen around the country or even in your state have been successful in that we should be encouraging and pushing in our states?
The question is, I mentioned re-assimilation of folks back into society. What policies have I pushed in our state, or what have I seen in other states that I would recommend that we should be embracing as individuals and as communities? This is a very, very, again, it's easy when we think about, as often as widows and orphans were mentioned, so too were people in prison. They really were. It's amazing. If you go back and read, it's easy to love the widows and orphans. That's like kittens. You know, it's easier. It just is. People in prison is harder. It's harder. And so to that end, we have a responsibility. What specific policies? I've said, listen, what's the most critical thing? That there have been studies done recently. One of the most comprehensive studies done by the Safer Foundation shows that those who are returning back into society, first thing I did, incidentally, was I fought for, and as a Republican, it was very unpopular even within my ranks, because ironically, people think somehow if you believe in second chances and redemption, somehow you're being soft on crime. Nonsense. Nonsense. This nation was founded as a place for second chances for many, many people. So what I said is, listen, I'll fight whoever, inside, outside, my party, cross party lines, and I led the charge to pass one of the most comprehensive expungement bills in the United States. And we passed that when I still had a divided House and Senate, because I shamed people who didn't want to have me have any success but were in a different party. And I was like, really, you're going to stand here and say you're not for expungement? So ultimately, that ended up passing. So we passed an expungement bill to give people a chance to assimilate back in that way. But that doesn't do it by itself, because I'll come back to this foundation study that was done. A second thing I did is I did what's called ban the box, or provide a fair chance, where on all state applications for any job in the Commonwealth, not for private companies, I don't control that, but for any public job, there's no longer a box that you have to check if you have a felony record. Any good employer is still going to do a background check. Any good person wanting to be a part of a community or a job is going to put it forward, but you're not going to be put in a circular file before they even have a chance to look at this. And I would encourage, ask in your state.
Wow. That's good.
Seriously. Ask in your state. If your state still has a box on state forms for people to check, march on that state capitol. Ask your governor and your legislatures to ban that box. Or it's sometimes referred to as the Fair Chance Act. I mean, it goes by different names, but ask them to do it. It costs nothing. Costs nothing. I got a lot of grief. Interestingly, there was a woman that I hired on my team shortly after we did that. This woman had a criminal record, a felony record. She's got a PhD. Grew up in the African-American community, a poor rural community, fell victim to many of the things that sadly is a part of a lot of our urban communities, but redeemed herself, took herself back, found a second opportunity. Her story is not unlike your star in many respects. Has a PhD now, brilliant woman, articulate. Right shortly after we passed this, the newspapers were attacking me because I'd hired a felon. Like, for crying out loud. You think I cared? No, I pushed back on the push. Seriously, that kind of thing. So that's one thing. Also, a couple other things real quickly. This study that was done by the Safer Foundation said that if you look at people who've been out of prison for the first 3 years, the recidivism rate in this country is over 50% within the first 3 years. It's ridiculous. It's a revolving wheel. And we spend tens of thousands of dollars, as much as we spend to put a kid in college, to keep him in prison. In Kentucky, it's about $25,000 a year we pay to keep the 25,000 people that we have in Kentucky in prison. And so here's the thing. If a people in the first 12 months, if in any 12 months of the first 36 months they're out, have what? A job. Just a job. Just a job, then they have a 1/3 chance of, they have an 18% chance of recidivism versus a 50-some-odd% chance if they're employed in 12 of 36 months after they get out. So what we're now doing, I have what I have called a program that I started called Justice to Journeyman, where we're going inside our prisons, men's prisons, women's prisons, and inside of our youth detention centers. And we're starting journeyman training, which is an actual licensing certification. When you have a journeyman's license, you can go anywhere in America and get a job in this environment, and a good job. But it takes about 540 hours on average of classroom time in addition to on-the-job training time. And where do you have a more captive audience for classroom time than in prison? So why not, seriously, so why not start it? So we've started these programs in the prisons, and these kids are now, and not kids, are getting these trainings while they're inside. For the ones who want the second chance, we're giving them that opportunity. We're also making changes. We've gotten rid of a whole lot of the nickel-ante rules that we used to have, technical violations that a person would have a 3-year sentence. They'd get out in 6 months because that's appropriate. There's no threat. It's a nonviolent offense. Maybe a small petty crime of some sort. They should have been punished. They were. They're turned back out. And then they have a technical violation because they don't have transportation. They miss the bus. They miss a probation hearing. And then, boom, you're back for the whole 3 years. That kind of nonsense is wrong at every level. At every level. Everyone loses. And so we've gotten rid of things like that. So these are just some of the things. I heard an idea that I've not yet applied because I just heard it. You asked about other states, and I love it. We don't have as many urban communities as some of your states do, but we have a couple. And one of the things that I heard is that they provide people in one state, I believe this, or they were looking at it at least, I'm going to look at it, is that if you come out and you have paid your restitution and you're out and you're on parole or whatever the case may be, that you get for a year free transportation on public transportation. For 1 year. You have to have proof of it's you. You can't transfer. It's got your picture on it, but that provides you something else a lot of people don't have, is an ID, some verification. But you can get on any public transportation and ride it wherever you want. And then you don't, I mean, why not? Bus is going there anyway. Seriously, really and truly. Why not? What does it cost? It costs nothing. Nothing extra. And what it does for that individual gives them the chance to go to work, gives them a chance to redeem themselves. So these are just a few things. They're not going to cure everything by themselves. I could tell I'm about to get the hook here, so it's...
No, well, I could almost listen to you for a long time, but I wanted to take 2 questions, and I'm going to do the last questions. One, can you tell us a little bit about Kim Davis and that whole interaction, and you just ended on courage. And then the other question is, and I'll let you end on this one, can you tell us what prompted you to run for governor?
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, heaven forbid. It's miserable enough in this job. Here, it really and truly, it's more than you know. And it's an interesting world, the world of politics. How many of y'all have ever been in an elected position politically for anything? God bless you, a couple of y'all. I mean, that is, from the moment you even say you're going to run, people you don't even know hate you and have firm opinions about you that are based on their own hypotheses. It is more of a cesspool than you know. The first question was Kim Davis. Kim Davis, this went on the summer before I was elected. I was a candidate. I was running against the state's attorney general. The then governor of the state refused to do a simple thing, which was remove the name of the county clerks from being essentially an endorser of this particular marriage. It didn't officially sanctify or officialize that marriage, but by law, their name had to be on it, and the certificate was not valid without their name on it. So whether they meant to be or wanted to be or not, they were a party to something. We were talking a moment ago about same-sex marriage. Appropriately so. I mean, read the scriptures. I don't need to tell you what God thinks of same-sex marriage. But Kim Davis was a county clerk who, based on her faith, said, listen, I don't want to be an officiant. I don't want to have my name on these documents. And so I'm not going to issue any marriage certificates. Oh, did they come out of the woodworks to attack her? Oh, did they hate her? Who did she think she was? She wasn't saying that none would be issued. She said an assistant clerk could issue them. They could go to a nearby county, which is only a few miles away, and get one. There really wasn't anybody at that time that was even seeking them, although once that came out, people came in from around the country wanting to get married in that county. Seriously, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. With cameras and lawyers, she was pushed back on. She was despised. She was rejected by many. She was ridiculed and mocked. She was a woman who had been previously married a couple of times, and people tore that apart. But all this before she had had a conversion, before she had turned her life to God, before she had had the very same thing that we've been talking about in terms of a second opportunity and redemption. And when she did have that, she said, I don't want to be party to this because it violates my First Amendment rights to my freedom of religion. And so they mocked and ridiculed, and our then governor refused to do anything about it. He said, if you don't like it, you should quit. That's the governor told her. All he had to do was take the names off. A governor had that ability. I was running. I said, if I'm elected, the first thing I'm going to do is by executive order, I'm going to take the names of county clerks off this form. There's no reason they have to be on there. It doesn't have to be. It is common sense. Heaven forbid. There's not a lot of room for that in the government anymore. But I will say this, so she was ultimately imprisoned. She was put in prison, even though there were other clerks in that office issuing these, because she herself refused to do it. They put her in prison in the United States of America in the 21st century. They put her in prison, and the argument that I had, and if you want to see a funny thing, it's still on YouTube somewhere. There's a guy on CNN, Don Lemon. Quite a character, that guy. But I will say this. He had me on that night, the night she was released from prison. Before this had been resolved, and when I was still a candidate, he wanted me on. And he played a clip from some television show that I've never even heard of or watched. It was some show about the White House or something, in which a pretend president was mocking the Bible and quoting supposed hypocrisies in the Old Testament versus the New Testament or something. And so he plays some clip that I'm listening to in the dark in my ear. I couldn't even see it. And then wanted to know what I thought about that and how I could justify her stance on biblical principles when, in fact, there were these hypocrisies that some TV actor supposedly found in a TV show I'd never seen. But it was a funny exchange. You could Google it up, Don Lemon, Matt Bevin, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. To say that he was frustrated would be an understatement. But what I said to him is, why does one person's First Amendment right have to be subjugated to someone else's First Amendment right? That with a little common sense, to your point, you can actually bring forward a solution that whether we agree with what is now the law or not, and people have very firmly and appropriately placed opinions on this, the fact is that two First Amendment rights can coincide at the same time, have equal protection under the law. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted the First Amendment rights of Christians to be subjugated to the First Amendment rights of more enlightened people. And I simply said, if I'm elected, I'm going to remove it from the forms, and I did that in the first couple of days that I was the governor. And now it's not an issue, and it never should have been. So the second question is, what motivated me to run for governor? This is the first political job I've ever had. It's a longer backstory, and I'll make it short because the time is late. But I will say this. Two things, one of which I've touched on tonight. 10 years ago, my wife and I tried to adopt a child out of the foster care system in Kentucky. She was 11 years old. We met her at the park because she was playing at the park with my little girls, and they were playing on the swings together, and I noticed they were hanging out with this little girl about their age. And so I started talking to this little girl and say, where are you here with your parents? No. You here with your grandparents? No. Who are you here with? She was there with a foster care home. She was in a group home, and they had brought these kids over. I started talking to her. She was 11 years old. And she shared as an 11-year-old would that she just had a heart. She just wanted to be adopted. She wanted a family. And she wasn't saying it as specifically as I'm even sharing it here, but she was saying that she was eligible to be adopted, and she knew that someone was going to adopt her. And she was just waiting because she knew someone was going to come. So we started this process, and we went through the biggest carnival. I wear this little button. It's a pair of scissors cutting through red tape. And I tell you, I pledged when I was elected, I'm going to cut 30% of the bureaucracy and red tape in our state that affects everything and every one of our lives. And in Kentucky, we're well on our way. I've cut over 875 regulations and thousands of rules, including things, I mean, seriously, and this will resonate with some in this room as I look around, you used to need to get a license to braid hair in Kentucky. Seriously. What a joke. I mean, who goes back twice for a bad weave? I mean, really? Nobody. Really? Who does? Nobody. Nobody. The market takes care of itself. The market takes care of itself just fine. I don't think you need to license that. So my point being that on a lot of fronts, cutting red tape is a good thing. We went through 13 months 14 months of bureaucracy, of paperwork, of getting home inspections, of getting fingerprinted multiple times, of having all of these intrusions into our home, of having our children all interviewed separately, and having questions about the ways in which we disciplined or what kind of rules we had in our house. And we went along with all of this because we wanted to adopt this little girl who had been in 14 different homes. She was 11 years old. She was never going to be, nobody was lining up to adopt an 11-year-old girl. And so we had this heart to try to adopt this girl. Then we had to take parenting classes for hours and hours and hours. We had to always take them together. We had to always take them on set hours. We couldn't take any of this online. Some of the classes, I kid you not, were being taught to my wife and I as the parent of 5 children by people who had no children, but they were teaching us how to be a parent. And all of this bureaucracy because rules were there that didn't need to be there. And after 13, 14 months of this, and the thousands of dollars and the hours of expenditure, and we were blessed we could afford the dollars, and we were fortunate we could afford the time. But at the end of it, here's what happened. We were told that, you know what? You already have 5 kids. It's better for her to be in a group setting than to be the 6th child in a family because she won't get enough attention. I kid you not. This is what, and until this year, guess what other rule doesn't exist in Kentucky right now? I'm telling you, this year. For no good reason. Some arbitrary, ridiculous reason. And I just was so heartbroken because this young girl is now an adult somewhere. And for those of you who know anything about foster care, when children age out at the age of 18, I could go for 2 hours begging you to step involved. If you're not involved and aware of what's happening in foster care, please, I beg you, go down to your local equivalent of the Department of Community-Based Services, which is what we call it in Kentucky, and ask questions and get involved. If you're a leader in a church, if you have an outreach in your church and you care about this, know enough to know what is or isn't happening, because there are children in your communities, children on your streets that are aging out at the age of 18 who have nobody. They are no longer the responsibility of the state. They have no support network. They have no family. They have no money. 54% of children who age out in America out of foster care, 54% have never graduated from high school or gotten a GED. And these kids are turning out onto our streets, and who is happy to suck them in? All the wrong elements. And this young girl who was 11 would now be in her 20s, early 20s. And statistically, it has not turned out well for her. I don't know where she is. I don't know what has come of her. But it breaks my heart to think about this. And while I was far removed at that time from ever even thinking about being in politics, I never even took so much as a political science course in my life. I'd never worked on a campaign. I'd never wanted to do this. But I'll tell you what, it stayed in the back of my mind, and I said, someday somebody should do something about this. And that was one. There's other reasons as well, but it was reasons like this, and this is what I'll close with. I wrote a letter back in 2013 initially. I wrote it to a member of the faith-based community, somebody who many of you would probably know who it was, perhaps. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But this letter I wrote, where are the Daniels? Where are the Daniels? Where are the people? I looked around our society and I said, we're falling apart. We literally are crumbling. the degradation of our society and the amoral nature of it and the godlessness of it and the apathy of it and the soft underbelly and the abdication of responsibility starting in the homes and the pulpits and in the corporate boardrooms and everywhere else, and we're falling apart. Where are the men and women among ourselves that are willing, like Daniel, to stick up, to defy the king on principle? Where are the men like Frederick Douglass? Where are these people? And I said, where are the Daniels? That was this. And I talked about who are the people from among us, from the men and women of faith who are called to step up, to not be of the world, but to be in it, and to be engaged and to have a responsibility. You'll read the book of Daniel. God is very much involved with who's in and who's not in political office. But the fact of the matter is this. The letter I got back and the response was less than satisfying, and that too was a catalyst for this. So all these things, it's a combination of things. Things don't happen by accident. They don't. God, again, you know this. Things do not happen by accident. So I'm here as a result of many decisions that were made by people that I know and people that I didn't know, by life experiences and circumstances that I had, by things that broke my heart and things that made me angry. And all these ultimately caused me to think, you know what? I'm always holding out for somebody to step up. And maybe someone in your congregation or maybe even yourselves are always asking somebody to step up. Well, somebody needs to do this. Someone needs to get in. Someone needs to start a program. Why isn't the somebody you? Seriously, somebody's always somebody. And seriously, somebody is always somebody. Somebody is always the somebody. And this is where I came to a few years ago. And I said, why shouldn't I be the somebody? Maybe I'm the somebody. Maybe I'm the somebody that's supposed to step up. And that's how I got into this thankless job. Thank you.